Hello, everyone. I know you might be a little confused. Here we are on a Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And for this, also for anyone who is not watching right now, who may be watching later, the replay, I guess, either on Facebook or on YouTube. This is a special, very special episode of Unfound Live. And what I'm going to be doing is I got a request from the Help Find Kemberly Ramer page. They asked me if I would do a special live show regarding her disappearance, which is a case that was just released on Unfound just 2 days ago. And they wanted me to talk a little bit more about it, be able to take questions for anybody who on their page, make comments. Maybe we'll throw around a couple theories, but that's what's going to be going on. I was asked to do this kind of special request, and I said, absolutely, I would love to do that. This is a first. I've never been asked to do this before, despite me doing the regular Unfound live show on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern since about last October. But I thought, sure, that's a great idea. Let's do it. Let's see how it works out. And maybe this will be something that becomes a permanent fixture, and I will gauge that on how this all goes today. I do not have a script. I have no outline. I'm just going to be talking a little bit off the top of my head, and I'm hoping that I get a lot of questions and we can get some discussion going, because really, like I said, I brought really not a lot of any information to the live show today. Thank you for everybody that's tuning in. We're just going to do this a little different than we do the regular live show. I appreciate everybody, tuning in. I see Sue. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that if you have anything to say, Sue, please type it in there. And I'm just going to start a little bit with what I did. Here's where I'm going to start. And once again, we're not going to talk any other true crime news or any other unfound cases, nothing. We're just talking about Kemberly Ramer's disappearance only today. Okay, so if you have questions for me about anything else, please contact me personally, email the program, or we can talk about it this coming Wednesday. As you can see, I'm still in Pennsylvania, by the way. And thank you for everybody who is joining in. I'm not going to pick you all out by name because this, once again, a little bit different of an atmosphere environment for what we're doing today. The first thing I did when I was asked, to do this, sometime I guess on Friday evening, was I went back and I looked at some of Unfound's other cases to see those ones that remind me of Kemberly Ramer's disappearance. And I don't know if I was shocked or anything, but really the disappearance that is the most like hers, at least the way the facts set up, we don't actually know what happened. We knew what happened. We could just go solve it today. But the facts as we know them, as much as we can know, they're very much like the disappearance of Evelyn Hartley in La Crosse, Wisconsin back in the 1950s. That's a case that I covered with the help of Anthony, the blogger, back, I think, in early December of 2017. That was a case where a girl was at home. She was babysitting, and somebody obviously came into that house where she was babysitting and took her out. And that's a case that's still unsolved 65 years later now. Some rumors about who the suspects could be, but probably not as good a choice of suspects in her case as in Kemberly's case. But in both cases, you have two girls seemingly at home. Yes, Evelyn was babysitting, but she's essentially home by herself. No other adults were there. Somebody comes into the house. There are signs that a struggle happened. She disappears. Kemberly disappears. And I thank you all for joining in. Got a nice showing today. Thank you. So if anybody who is new to the program, and I know, you should know, the numbers for Kemberly's episode of Unfound have been extraordinary. It seems like every week, the downloads, the likes, the followers, etc., it goes up every week. In Kemberly's case, so far in the first 2 days has been very, very popular. So I'm guessing there are a lot of people who are listening to Unfound for the first time. So if this Evelyn Hartley episode is not familiar to you, or maybe you saw it on the list and haven't listened to it yet, if you've listened to Kemberly Ramer's case, I think you could go back to Evelyn Hartley's case, and that was a really good interview. Anthony did a great job as a guest on that episode, and you should check out his blog. You're going to see a lot of similarities between the two, even though they're separated by 40-some years in two different states, etc. So that was the first thing, and I noticed. And I think what it shows is that if you're going to have a situation like this where you have a girl who's at home and somebody comes into that house and takes her, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a boyfriend or anybody. In Evelyn Hartley's case, to our knowledge, all these years later, she didn't have a boyfriend at all, wasn't hanging out with any suspicious types, did not have anybody in her circle of friends that have a criminal record, unlike Kemberly, as we found out, with Jerry Anderson, or let's just call him Jeremy Anderson because that's his real name. Jeremy Anderson with his record. And now since Friday, quite a few people have contacted me personally telling me about Kemberly's secret boyfriend at the time, and I'm still not going to mention his name. If Sue wants to type it in the over here on the side, she can do that. I think what Evelyn Hartley's case shows, in contrast to Kemberly Ramer's, is you don't necessarily have to have anybody in your circle of friends or, guys orbiting a girl, and these guys have criminal records for a girl to disappear. Having said that, I'm inclined to believe that most likely some guy or men with a criminal record probably did have something to do with Kemberly's disappearance. I think that's a possibility. But on the facts, on the general facts of each case are very similar. There are a couple other cases where women have been taken from their homes. There was one that I was thinking of course, Kelly Rothwell. She was a woman who I believe was beaten to death at her house and then taken away. That's a case that happened very close, to where I now live in Florida. Linda K. Carroll, which is a case coincidentally up from the Panhandle of Florida, very close to Alabama. She was taken out of her house probably by, I can't remember if it was her estranged husband or her ex-husband. She was taken out. So both of those cases did involve, we believe, suspects who knew the missing woman very well. Okay, so you have to look at that as well. Evelyn Hartley, probably taken by a guy who didn't know her. Those other two cases that Unfound has covered women taken from their homes by men who probably did know them. So it can go either way. It can go either way. So I would go back, once again, if you're new to the program, check out some of those episodes to see how they are similar. Because if you don't know, once again, if you are all new to Unfound, I'm not just about telling cases to people and having guests on. We just talk about the facts and we say how interesting they are. We cover these cases so we, the public, and I am part of the public, we can learn more about missing persons cases. So missing persons cases can, we can learn more about them. That's going to make them more likely to get solved. All right? Because trust me, the police need all the help they can get. And a well-informed public can help them. And that's one of the goals of Unfound. So I think that if you are, you've known about Kemberly's disappearance for a while, I think it would help you to go listen to some of these other cases. Once again, Kelly Rothwell, Evelyn Hartley, Linda K. Carroll, as cases that are kind of similar, so you can kind of learn what those kinds of cases, disappearance cases, those templates are like. All right, that's the first most important part. So that's the first thing that I did when, I was told that, okay, I was going to be doing this program. I thought, well, maybe it'd be good to go back and look at some other cases that are similar to Kemberly's. And yes, as April said, April is the one who set this all up. If you have a comment or question about Kem case, don't be afraid. Don't be shy to ask, please. I can talk off my top of my head pretty well. I have some opinions on it, a little more insight than I usually expose on the case, than I usually talk about in the episodes. And the reason I don't talk a lot about my own personal insights on the program is, even in Kemberly's case, is because I know how much that influences what people think. All right, I don't want to do that. I want you to be free thinkers out there. I want you to be independent thinkers. And I know just from experience, as soon as I start expressing my opinions, suddenly people start thinking like I do. And I don't want that. I really don't. I'm not going to try to force any theory or anything like that down anybody's throat. I have my insight, and oftentimes my listeners think differently than I do, and I think that's great. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I'm not trying to make anybody think a particular way. Now, if you would like more of my insight, and I do this for every case, I do have a Patreon blog that is private, where I go into much deeper analysis than you hear in the program. And that's for people who are paying only $2 a month to be Patreon supporters. And I've already written my analysis of Kemberly's disappearance there. I will give you now some highlights, from that and what I think I know. First of all, I want to go back to something. What I've learned since Friday, and once again, I don't know if Sue knows this. I'm not going to ever mention any of these people's names. Their identities are safe with me. However, I've urged all of them to contact Sue personally. All right, and I do that in every case. Anytime somebody contacts me after an episode to say, hey, I think I know something, I'll listen to the person. I'm willing to talk to anybody. But I always tell that person, please go to my guest. Please find that guest and talk to them yourself. Okay, I say that every week regarding that. But since Friday, and it's only not even been, it's been about, a little over 2 days, over 48 hours since the episode has come out, I've had many people send me information about Kemberly's secret boyfriend at the time. And we didn't really have a lot of information for him about him for the episode, but I think that Sue should know. And I want, once again, those people have contacted me. If you're in here, I want you to contact her with your own personal stories and things. That it doesn't sound like what has gone on in this guy's life since 1997 has been much different from the kind of life that Jeremy Anderson was living at the time. That's the truth. That's what people have told me. I don't know this guy personally. I'm hesitant, once again, to give out his name, even though I've been told it. But that is, I'd say I've gotten at least 10 emails telling me that people who've been around him or heard about him or known him or run into him in Alabama to say over the last 20-some years that he's not that great of a guy. So we have to factor that into that, on top of the fact that I've been told he was like 10 years older now than Kemberly. So it's a 27-year-old doing with a 17-year-old. Really. Let me go. Here's a question. April, do you think that the phone numbers that were called from the house, the owner to that phone number could have changed it by the time the FBI got a hold of them? No, I don't. I don't know, April. I don't think that would be possible. And the 850-966-0000 number could have been so someone couldn't come behind them and hit redial. That's possible. Unfortunately, it's been 20 years, and you wouldn't think that would make much of a difference when it comes to phones, but it does. And I really don't remember how that all worked, and I'm sure that varied from telephone company to telephone company. So, and so it could have been someone. It's very, very possible. But I'm thinking, April, that even so, wouldn't that person still know that those numbers would show up on a record somewhere eventually, even if you did that? Just saying. Being that the reason we know what the phone numbers were is because somebody found those phone records. And so that wouldn't have changed anything trying to wipe that out. I don't know what to think about, to specifically talk about the phone numbers. I can look at those phone numbers a variety of ways. and as much as I like Sue, we've gotten along great, and I hope to help her from now to the end of time try to figure out what happened to her daughter. I do, have a little bit of a different opinion. I don't believe that those were dialed frantically. There's just something. I understand somebody might be in a panic if something happened, but let's just put it this way. The biggest panic that we've all experienced in our lives, well, we personally haven't experienced, but like 9/11, some of those people, like, for example, in the World Trade Center, we've all heard those recordings up to the point where the buildings collapse and people on the phones to the last second, and you can hear them scream. It's all horrible. It's all horrible. But even they knew they were in trouble. They knew that maybe they weren't going to live. They figured out how to dial the right phone number on that day that they probably knew maybe they weren't going to make, it out of that day probably. They found a way to dial the right phone number. Are we saying then that whoever was in that house that night on August 15th, 1997 couldn't figure out how to dial the right phone number? These are the things. And Sue, I know you said that. Sue, I really panic. I'm just not as sure about that, being that I've had a little time to think about it. Not to mention that in the 90-some cases that I've covered, I don't think that I've ever covered one where somebody dialed a phone number in a panic and got it wrong. So, and I've covered, 90-some cases now. It's a pretty good mixture. All I'm saying is we need to be open to other ideas instead of just focusing on the idea that the number was down in a panic. It could be some other reason, and we just need to sit down and really do some critical thinking as to why that would be. It could be the person wasn't dialing in a panic at all. The person was trying to reach somebody and was just dialing, maybe the person wasn't there. He was dialing an old number. We don't know. Or it was part of a disinformation campaign by whoever did take Kemberly. And I would add something to this, not to get too conspiratorial, but there's really no proof that Kemberly was actually kidnapped from the house. I know about the pictures. I know about the pillow. But allegedly, there's no other signs that Kemberly was ever there. There's no blood of hers or anything like that. These are things, once again, these are things that we have to think about. I just don't know at this point, being so focused that we get in our minds that it happened this way, we may be ruling out other possible scenarios that fit the facts and not having to go into crazy land where it's UFOs or something. But what are the scenarios that could fit the facts instead of just trying to tell stories to ourselves? Megan says, were the numbers similar? I don't believe they were, Megan. Sue would know more about that. Like someone trying to remember a number. That's, Megan, that's totally possible. Lenola Miller asked her, back then, did they have cadaver dogs to check the house? Sue felt that Kemberly was killed in the home. I don't think, Lenola, I don't think did they use dogs at all? I don't think they did. I don't think they did. Simply because I don't know how seriously the police really took the disappearance at the time. And Lenola, you should know if you're new to the program. I don't know. I'm sorry if I don't know. That happens a lot. That happened happens in 1997. It happened in 1987. It happens today, where cops don't take these disappearances seriously and things don't get done. That happens all the time. And it is not specific to Kemberly's disappearance. It happens in every state in the union that I've covered so far. Annette asked, how old was the boyfriend's child at the time? I've actually found out he had 2 kids. I'm not sure what their ages were. Would the child have been old enough to say they saw her leave? That's something, Annette, that I don't know. Has anyone looked into what the guy said about a well on 84 in Coffee Kelly? JB asks. JB, I've gotten some emails about that. I have to tell you, once again, from my perspective, I'm not saying it's not possible or conceivable. But I hear a lot about people being thrown down wells in a lot of the cases that I cover. And I tend to dismiss most of them. The truth is, JB, I know a lot about missing persons cases. Off the top of my head, I can't name one case where a person was ever found at the bottom of a well, even despite wells being checked. So when it comes to Kemberly's case, I'm inclined to believe that she's not in a well, but you know, if being thrown down a well is a rumor I hear in a lot of disappearances. I hear that. I hear being thrown in a wood chipper. I hear being fed to hogs. I hear that in over half the cases. I hear these rumors that go around, and I just tend to dismiss all of them because those rumors are generally generated by Hollywood. People see a movie like Fargo where the guy's cut up in a wood chipper. They see Hannibal, the movie, where a guy's fed to hogs, and that somehow makes it into the rumor mill regarding missing persons cases. But I don't know if any wells were checked or not. I probably not, because I don't know how much the police really did at that point. Carmen says, a man who says he was there the night Kem disappeared says she was put in an old well at marker 154 off the 84 bypass next to an old barn right outside Op going towards Elba. Said well could have been covered up. Some should really check it out. He told me where and who some of the people were. Said he saw it happen. Don't know if it's true, but it's worth a shot. Carmen, if the police want to look into that, they're, you know, once again, though, after 21 years, you think somebody would have come forward that saw something like, I'm not trying to dismiss it, might be worth looking into. But I'm doubtful, just once again, from my experience. Michelle says, I think it's important for people to tell anything they may feel is important, even if you think it may hurt Kem's family or someone may be offended. You never know what may help. They just want this resolved. And if you know a rumor, you don't know if that rumor may help. You may think it's just a rumor. I wish I had information to share. Megan, were there pics that were knocked down on the same wall as her bed? Were the pics in the hall and the upper side of the wall knocked down also? Megan, the way I understand it, the way Stu told me, is that the pictures in Kemberly's room were knocked down. The pictures in the hall were not knocked down. The only sign of disturbance was in a room, and the reason I think that's the case, because if pictures were knocked down in the outside hall, then I think her dad would have seen it on Saturday when he came home. So there's that. So April saying, JB and Carmen, he's been interviewed, not a very credible source. Okay. What about the father's girlfriend, Annette? Really have not thought about that, Annette. I do want to get into something. How many numbers were called? Beth Ann wants to know. Beth, I believe 3 different numbers were called, and the last number that was called was the one that ended in 0000. I think that's what Sue said. Has the father of Jerry ever been questioned? He would have been the sheriff's deputy or detective down in Florida. I think he should be. I think that Sue and I decided that he had not been. I know that Sue has not talked to him personally. And we do know, I mean, just to throw this out there for people that are new to the program, as far as Unfound's numbers go, at least 10% of the cases Unfound has covered since this show started in September 2016, 10% of them involve police officers. So talking to Jeremy's father, is not as crazy as it might sound. Do I think he personally knows anything? I don't know. But all these years later, it can't hurt. Now, I think, though, that most parents are going to lie for their kids. That's the way it gets. What I've also learned. So, but it's probably worth a shot. We just don't know. Okay. Susie says, I read the search that they did search that well. Yeah, Erica says melted with acid. That's another, Erica, you should know that's another rumor that I hear. Let me see. Yes, Sue is saying, if anyone has information, tell the police, either OP, Walton County, or the FBI. Absolutely. Susie says, I also believe Jeremy's dad helped him cover it up. We have no proof of that. And see, this is, once again, that's why I hesitate getting too much into, you know, starting to call people out and things like that. You know, we can talk about Jeremy Anderson because he has a criminal record. He's a felon. He has some felonies that go in line, which could lead to a disappearance. But on the other hand, I'm not going to start going after a policeman or something like that who has no police record or anything like that unless I have a reason to. And for anybody that knows about the Thomas Brown case, you can go check that case out as far as I handle situations like that. I just don't want to get into a situation while, you know, we're calling out every person in UP or every person in Walton County or something is having something to do with it. I just try to stick with what I think I've learned about disappearance cases. Emily, I wonder if maybe Kem found out something about Jerry and he killed her to shut her up. Kem's friend did say Kem didn't care for Jerry. So Kem could have found out something about him and planned on telling her sister. That's possible. Is always the one fingers point to. Billy, that's certainly true. We can only look at the people we know about. And in Kemberly's case, she had two guys in her, you know, within her circle of friends who, her secret boyfriend and Jeremy, who were not obviously good guys. Okay? Obviously not good guys. And so you have to take a look at them. Lenola says, Sue said the town that she lives in Florida is looking at Kemberly's case. This is great, but unusual for another state to investigate. Lenola, totally true. Totally true. Emily says, why else would Jerry want to get rid of Kemberly? What is his motives? Well, I've had a chance to think. Let me just go in this direction instead. As I've said many times, is that relationships are the main motivator in disappearances. Now, that doesn't mean it's, when I say the main one, it doesn't mean it's 95% or 90, but it's like 60%. And if a person disappears, at least 60% of the time, it's by someone, caused by somebody who was close to them. Stranger on stranger crime, at least in the United States, is very, very rare. So this is why, you know, I gravitate toward Jeremy. I gravitate toward the secret boyfriend. But somebody else I gravitate to is the secret boyfriend's ex-wife. Ex-boyfriends, ex-wives, ex-girlfriends, ex-husbands play a huge part in disappearances. You know, a woman's trying to move on. She has another guy in her life, and then the guy she's currently dating does something to her. Or an ex-wife finds out her ex-husband has a new honey, and she wants to do something. Rarely do women to go about these crimes themselves. We know that women don't commit a lot of murders, not just in the United States, but anywhere, but they often get some guy to do it for them. And of course, there's the very famous case in Florida of Dan Markel, where the ex-wife's brother and some of his friends took it about to murder her ex-husband, Dan Markel. You can look that murder case up that was solved just within the last year. So that's why I leave myself open to it. I don't know what the ex-wife's name is. I don't know anything about her. I've had some people tell me about her. Some people that I actually had one person who used to be related to her contact me. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know her name. I don't know if she has any criminal record or anything, but I have to keep it within my mind that if she found out that her ex-husband had some new woman, even though if the woman is 17 years old, who knows? We all know, you know, we know how passion and hate can motivate us. Now, for all of us sitting here, you know, I'm hoping I've never murdered anybody or done anything. I'm hoping none of you have. But we know how sometimes when we get in relationships, we become a little obsessive. We do this, we do that. Some things that aren't rational. And this is what comes to mind with, you know, was Kemberly over at her secret boyfriend's? Did she come home and did somebody follow her home? I think that's a very it's a scenario worth talking about. It is absolutely worth talking about. Once again, just based on the statistics of disappearances. Kimberly says, if the boyfriend was cleared as a suspect, why is his name always hidden? Well, the reason his name is hidden is because he was cleared as a suspect. And once again, it's kind of an open secret. Once again, I think if you dig hard enough, that the name is out there. But once again, I don't want to say it because of the person who told it to me was after the fact. All right, I don't want to get into that Ed's talking about things he's not allowed to say. I don't want to get into that. That's not what I do. April is asking Sue a question about Jerry's reasons for taking that truck when he had Kristen's car. April, that's a very good question. Tasha says, last football season, on our 20th homecoming, we were told of a story that Kim was at a party, people seen her at this party, and something happened to her and it got covered up. Tasha, at least 3 people have emailed me that same story. You know, the problem starts when, well, if all these people were at this party, why has none of them ever come forward and offered anything other than that? And I want you to know, once again, for anybody that, you know, they only know about Kemberly's case and don't know about all the other missing persons cases out there, that's very common to hear a story about somebody was at a party or something, and, you know, and then you find out allegedly all these years later, you know, we're supposed to believe all these people, you know, kept their mouths shut. I hear that a lot, and I'm fairly suspicious of all of it, but it could be true. But, you know, in my experience, when I hear after 20 years that a bunch of people who have nothing to gain by keeping their mouth shut, keep their mouth shut about a murder or allegedly doing that, then I just dismiss it to say, maybe that never happened. Maybe that's not exactly what happened. That's me. You may, you know, choose to think something different. Megan is saying, it just seems if she was up and not lying in bed, there would probably have been much more of a struggle. It really seems as if she was surprised in bed and it maybe was sexually motivated. Megan, that's possible. You know, kind of the, you know, we talked about Jeremy a bit, and I wrote about him a bit on the private blog at Patreon. He knew where the house was. He had been there before. He might have had a key. He has on his record burglary. Did he show up at the house and not know that Kemberly was going to be there? I think that's a possible scenario among many. And I also think it could be not Jeremy, but somebody else. Maybe somebody else thought that the house was empty and went in there and didn't know that Kemberly was there. That's possible as well. It also would go in line with the struggle. The reason that maybe, you know, looking at the pictures being off the wall and everything, would she fight if her ex-boyfriend was there, or her secret boyfriend was there? Would they have fought to the point that he knocked pictures off the wall? Probably not. You know, if she's over there and he's over there, I suppose that, you know, he wanted to have sex with her and she didn't want to do it and something happened. But could be. But it just doesn't seem as plausible as maybe some other scenarios. And once again, we have to remember, being that none, you know, Kemberly, none of her blood or anything, no ripped clothes or anything else were found in the house, it very well could be that the scene inside Kemberly's house, Kenny's house technically, was staged. That's something else that has come to my mind. Billy said, I feel if Kim can hide the fact that she dated an older man, what else could she have been hiding from everyone? Who is to say it isn't an ex-boyfriend or someone ex-girlfriend? Billy, you're exactly right. You know, but as I stated in the episode, to think that a 17-year-old girl is hiding a boyfriend from her parents is not unusual. You know, I grew up in the 80s. I knew girls that did that, and I will even say maybe that I had a couple girlfriends that I never told my parents about. Yes, it's true. So her keeping that from her parents, I guess, is not as unusual. What's bothersome is what the guy's age was, etc. If she was hiding some 17-year-old guy from her parents, that's one thing. A 27-year-old guy, I think how old this guy was, is certainly, I guess, is something else. But hiding secrets from your parents about relationships is not unusual for teenagers. So it very well could be. And that's why the episode, the theme of it was secrets. April says, I grew up around his ex-wife, and she's a very loving lady, sweet. They have been separated for years. Okay. Did Kimberly wear her contacts most of the time or her glasses, Barb? That is a question that Sue hopefully can answer. Sue says that party was looked into by FBI, no results. Okay. April, thanks for joining it today. Michelle, Miss Sue, I've been told the truck was stolen from the police department before they could run forensics on it. Is that true? Michelle, I've never heard of that. Sue, please answer that. Beth, did she not show for the Saturday morning activity? Did her friends try to find her that morning? That's an interesting question, Beth. That is an interesting question. Thank you for asking that. I'm not sure about that. Maybe your friends thought. Sue, that would be very interesting. I know you're in here. Did any of her friends try to contact, try to hunt her down, Kimberly, on Saturday? And did they ever have a theory as to why she wasn't around on Saturday? See, I hate it when I hate it and I love it. I wish that's a question I would have brought up during the interview. Beth Ann, that's a very good question. Thank you. Very, very insightful. Thank you. Shuri is saying, I think so too. She thinks that the scene in the house was staged. Okay. Donna says, I believe the boyfriend at the time, his friends were real young. His kids were real young, between 5 to 7 years in age. John says, the FBI, ABI, and OPD searched my property with the dogs a few years ago, thinking she may have been dumped here before we got the property. John, if I may ask, who owned the property before you did? That might be interesting for everybody to know if they were, who owned the property before. If you feel comfortable saying in a public atmosphere, John, that might be an interesting something for everybody to know. Sue says that truck that he was on that night was found at a church. The owner got it back, and then it was cleaned before FBI got the truck. Right. And Sue answers that other question. Yes, she wore her contacts most of the time. April is saying, okay, maybe this is Beth Ann, maybe this will answer your question. April is saying one of her friends came early that morning and knocked and got no answer. They were supposed to leave to sell magazines, but Ken didn't come to the door. Sue has told me this. Okay, well, there you go. Came by, they were supposed to go sell magazines, right. Okay, thank you for answering that. That's a question I should have asked during the interview. So a friend came by, knocked on the door. Nobody, of course, nobody was there, and they just kind of went on with their day. That sounds very plausible to me. Barb is saying, with her contacts in place, makes me think that she was at home. Either that or she was out somewhere with her contacts and it was staged. I don't know. And we've been doing this we've been going for about 40 minutes now. And I think we have a lot of people watching today. Thank you so much. I'm going to say that the Kemberly Ramer disappearing was not planned. Okay. I have a 99% idea that when she went out that night, she went to her secret boyfriend's place, and whatever happened that night was not planned. I think that it was either something that got out of hand in a scenario where, some guy wanted to have sex with her. She didn't want to go on with that. Things got, out of hand. Maybe he hits her. Maybe she falls and hits her head. Something like that. I'm also open to the idea that somebody went into that house wanting to burglarize it or something, and Kemberly just happened to be there. Coincidentally, I think that's exactly what happened in going back to the beginning of this episode with Evan and Hartley's case, where I believe that somebody was trying to burglarize that house and Evelyn just happened to be there babysitting. I think that's what happened. So Emily, however, on the other hand, my assistant Emily is saying, I don't buy that someone broke into the house. I think whoever took her, she let them in or they had a key. But if Jeremy did it, he would have to know Kenny wasn't going to be home. But see, this is something I also, and I know a couple people have contacted me saying Jeremy was crazy and he wouldn't have been afraid of Kenny and all that, possibly. But generally, people go to raw houses and things. They want to make sure the owner's not home. And this still comes back to the idea, only Sue would know this. Maybe Sue's daughter Christian would know this. Was it Kenny's pattern to always be out on Friday nights? Did he always go see his girlfriend on Friday nights and not come back to Saturday mornings? Now, if that is the case, then possibly Jeremy or somebody else would have known about it and known that we can get into the house, we can steal these things, get away before he comes home the next morning. Now, if you're telling me that it was variable if Kenny was home on Friday nights, then I have to be open to different scenarios. And once again, I'm going to stand by the idea that generally people who are burglars want to avoid conflict. All right, they want to go into places where, and I know somebody told me that Jeremy had a violent record. I had somebody tell me that he slit somebody's throat, but then got off of it. You know, I have to admit, there's just been some stories that have been sent to me that I don't know. They sound like rumors to me. I don't know the extent to which Jeremy or anybody else would want to go into a house where a grown man was there. That's usually something burglars avoid. And that's what I'm going to stick to. Lenola says that they keep their doors unlocked. I don't know. I'm going to probably guess not. Living in a small town, we kept our doors unlocked. Perhaps someone had gone in waiting for Kemberly. And it very well could be that Kemberly very well could be that Kemberly went over to her secret boyfriend's place and they decide, well, you know what? My dad's not home. Why don't we go back to my place? They go back to my place. Something happens. This is why I say that whatever I think happened that night, I do not believe it was planned. I don't believe whoever went out that evening or was hanging out in Opp, Alabama that night had it on their mind that they wanted to do something to Kemberly Ramer that night. Unlike some of the other cases I've covered where I think they were planned. April says, sounds to me from the sound of the damage done to the door, and Sue talked about that in the interview, she could have tried to shut the door in someone's face, but they're out, put its hand up to stop the door, and maybe she ran towards the bedroom to try to get away, possibly. It's possible. I just think that the door would show a little bit more damage to it. It's possible. Liz says, Miss Sue, I never heard it said that her friends told the police at the time that her boyfriend took her and wouldn't let her go until you mentioned that in the podcast. None of our classmates I spoke to had heard that either. Were they talking about Kem's boyfriend or Kristen's? So you're going to have to answer that one. That does not ring a bell. Loretta asks if they went into the house to burglarize it, was anything missing? Sue said that nothing was missing. Nothing was missing in the house, which could lend itself to believe that it wasn't a burglary. You know, you think if you're, you know, I think back to maybe a case like, maybe another case that's like this is Teresa Butler's, who was taken from her home. I think that was also a burglary gone bad, but even in that case, things were taken. Many things were taken, as a matter of fact. That happened in the early 2000s in Risco, Missouri. So, you know, there's another case where it looks like it's a burglary, but, you know, the radio got stolen out of the truck and video game consoles were stolen, and then Teresa got taken too. So maybe you're right. Maybe it could be it wasn't a burglary because nothing was stolen. Megan says, maybe ex-wife shows up while she is at the boyfriend's and they fight and Kem gets hurt and they stage the scene to throw everyone off. Sue says that Kemberly would have locked the door. Sue, I'm inclined to agree with you. Donna says, I honestly don't think the ex-wife had anything to do with it. I believe they had been divorced for a while. Okay, so maybe she had moved on to other guys, greener pastures. Donna, very possible. Burglars don't usually get rid of a body unless they know the person. Michelle says, probably because they would be able to recognize or identify the person. That's certainly possible. Emily says, I think it was personal, and for what I know now, that Jeremy is the #1 suspect. Tracy says, I don't think it was planned either. Sherry says, I think we should continue to do Sunday discussions regarding Friday cases. Sure, you're just trying to take up more of my time, aren't you? I'm a busy guy as it is. And Jeremiah, thanks for getting in here. Billy says, I dated Jeremy and Christian dated Jeremy, and I have to say it, and I would believe Christian would say it. Jeremy was not an abusive person. If that was the case, we would have spoke up and said he was. That's why I said it wasn't him. Billy, Billy, I respect your experience, and that's why, Billy, frankly, I continue to be open to a lot of different possibilities, and I appreciate you being honest and taking a different view on this. Billy, thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't know him. I don't know him. I'm bothered by his record. But if you think that, while you were going with him, he was not abusive and everything, I believe you. I believe you. And I think that, we have to remember that Sue even said herself that Christian didn't want to get rid of him. And, so they must have been having a good relationship. And it wasn't until she found out about his record that I think things went sour. So he obviously wasn't doing anything within the relationship that caused Christian to want to dump him. So, Billy, I appreciate that. I'm not going to argue with that, but the only thing that I keep in mind is we just had this situation in Colorado, that guy who killed his wife, his pregnant wife, and his 2 daughters. I'm going to guess a week before that happened, probably people said that guy couldn't do that either. So, who knows what people can do if they're pushed to their limit for some reason, or, I don't know. But Billy, I appreciate you being honest about that and stepping forward to defend Jeremy in this. And once again, that's why I feel like I need to look at a lot of different possibilities. As you know, we've talked about Jeremy. We've talked about the secret boyfriend. We talked about his ex-wife. Sue says, I think it was sexually motivated, not planned. When I went to op, when Kem went missing, the girls were referring to Kem's boyfriend. They were saying Kem's boyfriend had her somewhere. Kem's boyfriend was ruled out by the FBI. Oh, I see what you're saying, is that the rumor was that he was keeping her somewhere, and of course that didn't turn out to be true. April saying accidents happen. Billy just saying I wouldn't rule it out at all. We're not trying to rule anybody out or rule anybody in. All we can do is, look at the possibilities. All we can do, I think that in this episode, we put out as many facts as we could. I think that we looked closely at people within Kemberly's circle. I think we've been fair about it. I don't think that we've slandered anybody or anything like that. The only reason we're looking at Jeremy is because he has a record. And some of those things do involve violence. That's unavoidable. That's on the record. And he did do some time. I'm not bringing Jeremy up because I personally dislike him. I don't know him. And if Billy, like I said, wants to, say that, he was never abusive and towards her or Christian, he wasn't abusive toward women, Billy, I believe you. I believe you. Lala is asking, was the comforter missing off Kem's bed? I was told it was. Also, what about her gold anklet? Those are 2 questions I don't have the answers to. Lala, I'm hoping Sue will answer them. Susie, has Jerry ever been asked as to why he took the truck? I don't know. I think that I asked Sue about this, And Billy, being that you knew him at one point, did you ever know him to take this truck at one time or another? Being that you dated him, it would be interesting for the rest of us to know. That might be helpful. Michelle says he had aggravated assault charges 2 months prior to Kem's disappearance. That's true. So he had the capability of violence, perhaps not to someone he was dating, but others. This doesn't mean 100% he's responsible, but it's a check mark in a circumstantial case. That's exactly. Thank you, Michelle, for putting it very concisely. I think that you wrote that very well. So just, like I said, to start this, all I try to do is take what I've learned about other cases and apply them to the case that I'm working on that week. And I can't avoid the situation that relationships are a main motivator in disappearance now. Jeremy didn't have a relationship. He knew Kemberly, but he didn't have a relationship with her. The secret boyfriend did have a relationship with her. And he wasn't just some other 17-year-old, two teenagers being together on a Friday night. He was a grown man with kids, with an ex-wife. Who knows what else he had going on. He has a criminal record also, I'm told. I don't know if he had one before, but he definitely has one now. So just don't know. I just, but we're trying to, and April asks, how far away was the truck parked from where he had Kristen's cars parked? I don't know that either. I don't know how that is relevant. I just don't know that question. But as I wrote in the blog, here are some things that I think that, Sue, if you're listening, and we've talked about some of these anyway, to kind of wrap this up. We've been going for almost an hour now. Here are where I believe the concentrations should be regarding this case. As somebody brought up, I think it would be a good idea to talk to Jeremy's father after all these years. See what he has to say. If he wants to blow you off, then that's the way it goes. I would like to see, we also have to remember that Jeremy didn't want to take a polygraph test. There could be several reasons for that, including the fact that he had just committed a couple crimes 2 months before, and he thought maybe that might come up in a lie detector test situation. Totally believable. But he should be asked here in 2018 if he's willing to take a polygraph test regarding Kemberly Ramer's disappearance. I've been told, we've talked about the ex-wife. Some people told me she's a perfectly fine person. She may very well be, but does she have any brothers who might not have liked her ex-husband going out with a 17-year-old girl? I think that that's worth looking into as well. In all of these cases, when they get to be 20 years old, my attitude is always trying to get back to basics because of all the rumors and things that can circulate over the years, being buried in a well, in a wood chipper, as I've heard in many cases, and all sorts of questionable stories that I've been told over the last 2 years. I'm a big believer in getting back to basics regarding the case and going back to those people at the time. Now, of course, we can't do that. Kenny, unfortunately, is deceased. But Jeremy's still around. The ex-boyfriend is still around, or the secret boyfriend is still around. The ex-wife is still around. Some of Kemberly's friends, I'm hoping, are still with us, still alive. And go back and maybe try to talk to these people all over again. If the police won't do it, then Sue, other people together in the family can get together to do this, or get a private investigator to do this. I think that that's what needs to be done in this case, getting back to basics once again, because it seems like it's a cold case, because there's surely a lot of people to talk to, because there's so many rumors. Once you get back to basics, you can start throwing those rumors out and bypassing them, kind of clean the slate, kind of thing. April said she had 2 brothers. Well, there you go. Lala says the window on the passenger side door of Kem's car would not roll up. That's news to me. I didn't know. I know all I did was ask Sue if there was anything unusual about the car. So we've been going for about an hour. I'm going to wrap it up right there. I hope that some of you have gotten some things out of it. I think we've gone over some theories. We talked about some more about the people around Kemberly at the time. We talked about some of the facts involved. And maybe if Sue goes back through this discussion, which will be saved along with this video, she can look at maybe some things that she can do or she can get somebody else to do in regards to pushing this case forward after 21 years. Once again, my suggestion is getting back to basics and making sure that everything that we know about this case 21 years later is actually for real, and make sure that no rumors or anything have kind of worked their way into the facts of the case. So I'm just going to leave it there. I mean, we had a huge turnout, what I think is a huge turnout today. I hope something, I appreciate the page being asked. I appreciate them asking me to do this. I'm glad to talk about it, kind of been like a moderator as well as some of the discussions that were going on here in the sidebar. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. Anybody wants to continue the discussions, you can do it in the Unfound discussion group or on the page. And for anybody who wants to contact me about information, please just go to Sue. She's easy to find on Facebook. I'm sure she'd be more than happy to keep your identity a secret. If you think you have something constructive to offer, please contact her. That's what she wants. That's why she came on the program, to get people talking again, to get people coming forward. So just go to her. I'm sure she'll keep me informed. I'm happy to know about it, but eventually I'm just going to turn everything over to Sue anyway. So you might as well just talk to her herself. I'm sure she would love to hear from you. So I'm going to go now. And for anybody that tuned in late, this will be on YouTube sometime before the day is over. Okay, so I'm going to go now. I hope the Kemberly Ramer page got something out of this. I thank them for asking me to do this. I'm happy to do it for them. And I will see you all again, either in the discussion group, and as usual on Wednesday night, I will be doing the regular Unfound live show, 9 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for tuning in. And I hope that we can get Kemberly's case solved one of these days very soon. See you.